Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the Zoic Ad Manager MCM webinar. So today we're going to take a little bit of time to go through some of the most common reasons for things like disapprovals in Ad Manager MCM and see how we can help you get yourself approval for Ad Manager. We know that this is something that some Zoic publishers have a little trouble with. It can be a bit of a frustrating process at times. So hopefully this webinar will help you out. My name's Harry. I've been with Zoic for nearly 5 years now, and I specialize in onboarding teams through our Access Now program. Some of you may recognize me from there, and nice to meet you to anybody who doesn't. With me, I've got Heather, who's in our PSM team, who is going to be helping out in the comments. So if you do have any questions at any point throughout this webinar, please do feel free to ask away in the comment section, and we'll be able to help you out there. So I'm just going to give this maybe 1 or 2 more minutes, and then we'll get started with the webinar. So make yourselves comfortable, and if there are any questions that you have, please do get them in the comment section, and we'll help out right away. Okay, guys, let's get started. So in today's webinar, what we are going to talk about is, as I say, the Ad Manager MCM process. We're going to cover what Ad Manager MCM sort of is, why it's important, and what you need to do to make sure that you have everything set up so you can get approval. So what is Ad Manager? So Ad Manager MCM. So Ad Manager is the way that Google allows us to manage your ad inventory on site, and MCM is their process. It stands for multiple customer management, and it just allows us as an ad partner to be able to manage your ad inventory at a large scale. What does that mean for you? Well, it means that you're able to get access to Zoic ads, but also that it gives you access to Google's high paying and exclusive ad demand through Google's Ad Exchange. The application process is pretty simple, but getting approval is sometimes not so simple. But without Manager, Zoic ads will not show. So it is an absolutely essential part of the setup process, and it is very much worth getting started, because once it is, you'll get access to the higher paying Zoic ads that we're all really excited to share with you. So what is required to get Ad Manager approval? So I've broken this down into sort of 5 key steps, and we'll go down in each of them in a little detail. So the first one is Google content policy. You need to make sure that your site's content is in line with what they require. And along with that is traffic quality, which we'll discuss in more detail, what is constituted as high quality traffic. As many of you may know, it doesn't have any minimum traffic requirements. So this isn't really about the volume of traffic per se, but we just need to make sure that any traffic that is coming to the site is of high quality. You need to be in a good standing with Google. That can be in an existing Ad Manager account, but it also means in other Google Ads accounts. Just make sure that there's no sort of policy issues outstanding, and we can talk about that and how we can maybe tackle those issues. You need to ensure that the content that you're developing is high quality. We'll talk about some of the key points with that later on as well, and we'll also cover a few little additional steps which sort of I guess, quick wins for making sure that your site is in line with what Google looks for an approvable site for Ad Manager. So Google content policy, first and foremost. If any of you have used AdSense in the past, or many other ad services have similar sort of lines when it comes to content policy, but this is very similar to AdSense. Essentially, what they want to look for is original and informative content. They need things to be family friendly. They typically look for blog style sites, but we do accept a lot of sites that have developed tools or games. For example, I know Wordle in the last year or so has become a huge hit, and so we see a lot of sites that have publishers taking their own riffs on things like that, and that's absolutely fine. That's perfectly acceptable. But what we would say is that you would need any tool or software or game that you develop to be developed by yourself and not taken from another source. But outside of that, it is typically blog style content that they approve, and they're looking for stuff that's, as I say, informative and of high quality. Some of the things that they do not like is, it may sound obvious, but explicit, adult, abusive, violent content. None of that stuff tends to really fly with Google. The things including promoting illegal behaviors, so sites, for example, that are allowing illegal streaming of movies and movie downloads, or even sites that don't have movie downloads themselves but are telling people where they can find them online. That's a big no-go. Google don't allow sites that are sort of promoting false information, such as fake news. As I said before, we typically only work with blog style sites, so sites that are just purely an e-commerce store or are a site promoting a corporate business. They don't tend to fly with Google either. So those are just some things to keep in mind. This is all available in Google's publisher policies. Just if you just search Google publisher policy or Google Ads publisher policy in Google, it'll be pretty much the first result there, and it breaks everything down in more detail. But yeah, the stuff on the left there, that's the stuff that you want to keep in mind for a target. And on the right, if you have that sort of content on the site, I would definitely recommend removing it, because you won't get very far with Google approval with any of this stuff on your site. So the next thing we were going to cover is traffic quality. And again, we're just looking for sort of normal, organic, and genuine user behavior on the site. Ideally, we like Google like organic traffic, but social media traffic is fine as long as you've built up a genuine social media following that you're promoting your site to. And things that Google and Izoit tend to look for are things like strong engagement metrics on the site. Not only are how long are people spending on the site, but are people actually engaging with your content? Are they interacting with your content? Visitor depth is a really good one to look at. So how many page views per visit are your users actually going through when they access your site? Are they just bouncing straight away, or are they taking time to look at a few more pages on the site as well? These sort of metrics are what we want to be kind of aiming for when we're trying to build traffic quality on the site, or that's the sort of thing that you want to be looking at. If you're seeing a shallow visitor depth, then maybe it's not really hitting the quality that Google are looking for. What we don't want to see in these cases are purchase bot traffic. Even we do see some publishers come to us and say that they've purchased traffic that is of high quality. Unfortunately, the whole practice of buying and selling traffic is a little bit, it's completely unregulated. It's pretty sketchy, and there's no real way for you to be able to ensure that traffic that you're buying, even if it isn't bot traffic per se, is of high enough quality to get approval. So we strongly recommend staying away from that sort of thing, because it will just result in sites getting denied. So definitely stay away from purchase traffic and bot traffic at all costs. And things that do get flagged up as an indicator of low quality traffic are things like poor user engagement, bounce rates. This is sort of the inverse of what we were just talking about. If we're seeing that users aren't really engaging at all with your content and are just bouncing straight away, then that's just a sign of a poor quality site. So that tends to be the sort of thing that will prevent you from getting Google approval. So this is just something to keep in mind when considering your traffic quality. So we've covered content and traffic. We also need to make sure that all publishers have a good standing with Google. So the first thing to make sure is that there's no Google policy issues on your Ad Manager account itself. You'll know if you've got a policy violation because you'll have got an email from Google on it. It'll also be inside a policy center within your Google Ads account. And this isn't just Ad Manager either. So all Google Ads accounts are kind of rolled into one Google Publisher account now. So your AdSense account, AdMob, these will all be linked with your Ad Manager account. So if you have any sort of policy issues on any of them, this will get flagged and it'll stop you from getting approval. So you need to make sure that all of your accounts are in good standing with Google. And you shouldn't be having, another point to note is you shouldn't be having more than one AdSense account. It's against Google policies. So Google Ads accounts and different email addresses are not allowed. You need to close them all. You need to close them all and just keep one singular Google Ads account, or that'll give you trouble in getting approval. And one thing that is worth noting is that when you apply to Ad Manager MCM through your Azure dashboard, you'll see that there's a little form that you need to fill out, and you have to select options on whether you have an AdSense account and whether you have an Ad Manager account, and it'll give you the correct instructions on what you need to send over to Google. Make sure you're paying attention to that. So if you apply to Ad Manager under a different email address from the one associated with your AdSense account, it's going to automatically get denied. So you need to make sure that you're keeping consistent with the single Google Ads account. If you have an AdSense account, apply using the AdSense email. If there are any issues with your AdSense account, don't try and get around it by changing the email on your Ad Manager application, because Google will flag it. So what you need to do is resolve the policy issue in your AdSense account rather than sort of try and get around it by using a different email, because it won't be able to get approval with it. So that's all sort of stuff to keep in mind when you're applying. Some of the most common sort of disapproval reasons we tend to see on an account level. So Google review account applications, and then after that, they review domains individually as well. We'll talk about domain approval a little bit later, but the account issues we tend to see is either if you've got a duplicate account. As I said, you're only allowed one Google Ads account now. So to solve that, you need to make sure you're closing all of your other Google Ads accounts and sticking to that one email address. And then the other, as I said, you need to make sure you're in good standing with Google. So if there are any other Google Ads accounts with policy violations, that'll also lead to a disapproval when you apply to Ad Manager. So just make sure you're checking all of the Google Ads accounts that you have. And if there are any issues in the policy centers, which can be found in the account settings of your AdSense account, your AdMob account, you need to work with Google to resolve that. Otherwise, you won't be able to move forward. But once you have appealed their decisions and got that overturned, then you should be able to apply to Google with no issue. But that's just something to keep in mind. If you get a disapproval, that's pretty much one of the only two reasons why you may get it disapproved. So we've sort of covered the things that you need with regards to content policies, traffic policies. We've talked a little about what you need to do to make sure you're getting Ad Manager account approval. And then the next thing I want to focus on in a little bit more detail is domain approval. So as I say, Google will review each domain individually, and they're looking for one of a few things, but I think the main thing that they do really target is high quality content. I think if a lot of you have had trouble applying for Ad Manager in the past, you will have seen and heard the denial reason, low value content, and it can be pretty frustrating because we all work hard on developing content for our sites, and this doesn't necessarily mean that they don't think it's good enough. It's good enough in that sense. It just can be a few things that you need to make sure that you're doing to ensure that you meet Google's sort of benchmarks when it comes to this. And so what do we mean when we say high quality content? content that provides value first and foremost. We'll cover this in the next slide and sort of break down exactly what that means. But that is definitely the most important thing. You need to make sure that you are separating yourself from the rest in the content that you write, and we can talk about a couple of ways that we can do that. A large amount of content. What I mean by that is that Google don't tend to approve sites that they consider thin or having not enough content on the page. The good thing is that if this is the only issue, then the solution is really easy. We just need to continue writing more of the good content that we've been writing before. But we'll talk about the sort of the recommendations we set when it comes to how much content that you write in. And then we need to make sure that the site is well organized and easy to navigate as well. And we'll talk about a few things that we can do to make sure that we're sort of hitting those benchmarks, as I say. So what do I mean when we say content that provides value? So the biggest thing that I would say you need to focus on in this is when you pick your niche for your site, is focusing on that niche. So one thing that Google really doesn't take very kindly to is referred to as keyword stuffing. So you may see sites that are targeting no particular niche in particular, but they're actually looking at targeting high volume search and like low competition keywords. So sometimes these sites may you may see sites that we tend to see, one example of it tends to be a lot of sites that are made that are focusing on cryptocurrency, but also things like insurance. So these are things that are high. They sort of tend to garner high paying traffic, but there's no real sort of authority there in any way. It's just writing posts that they think will get attention from Google's search engine, and that doesn't really tend to get approval by Google because it is categorized as low value. So what you need to do is when you're picking your site niche, you need to pick one thing to focus on and provide a depth of expert knowledge on that one thing, providing a spread of articles on different sort of subject matters will make it really difficult to get approval. And the content that you do provide needs to be, as I say, expert content. You need to separate yourself from things that can just be easily found by Google, and you need to provide your own sort of spin on things or your own value that's in addition to something that can be found on a source such as Wikipedia or just by Googling. And that, as I say, yeah, just make sure that you're covering things in depth. A surface knowledge of information doesn't really tend to be considered high value. So taking the time to really break things down in your niche and tackle the nitty gritty is what's going to sort of separate yourself from all the other thousands of sites, millions of sites that are out there. And so just to sort of balance that, basically the key points of the things that are considered low value content is, as I say, a site scope that's too broad, a site that's about tennis and also about cats is not likely going to get Google approval. They should be their own two separate domains. Short surface level content. It goes without saying, but scrape content is a massive no-go when it comes to Google and Ezoic approval. And I just want to take a couple of minutes to talk about ChatGPT in this point. So a lot of you may know already about the AI language models that are out there that are able to help you in writing content for your site. These are absolutely invaluable tools, and they're really, really handy when it comes to developing a large volume of sites, but I would exercise a lot of caution when using them. One issue with things like ChatGPT and other AI language models is that they don't really know what they're saying. They just write what they think is statistically the most likely answer to your prompt. And what this means is that it can give incorrect information and act as if it's giving correct information. That sort of thing is really bad when it comes to sort of developing content for your site, because if you get spreading wrong information, that's firstly against Google policy, but also it sort of decreases your authority on a subject manager, which can be really bad for SEO. and it's just generally considered to be low value. So by all means, if you're using ChatGPT to help write some content, that's great. But I would be sprinkling that in with a lot of your own written content, and I would be thoroughly checking what is being written and making sure that the information is correct. Because you want to make sure that you're providing that value in the content that you're sort of creating for your user base, and that is something that's really important. We're seeing people use AI language models a lot at the moment, and yeah, just something to keep in mind. So how much content should you be producing? We said before that we need to have a large amount of content on the site. So we appreciate that some of you may be newer publishers working with new sites or building secondary sites that are even newer. So we're not talking about a Wikipedia, CNN level of content here, but I would say as an absolute minimum, you'd need 15 posts on the site. If you're categorizing your content, which we will talk about later, and I do believe you should categorize your content, you should be having at least 6 posts per category. Have a good spread of information. Don't focus too much in one area of your given niche. And the ideal sort of content length that we tend to look for is at least 500 words, probably more in the 1,000 word range. We understand that's not possible for everything, but definitely be aiming for at least sort of 500 words per post. And then when it comes to organizing content, as I said before, I do think or highly recommend that you categorize content, split it into categories, and put your categories somewhere that's easy for your users to find. Your users will likely be coming to your site to find a specific piece of information, and we need to be making that as easy as possible for them to do. So posts should, as a general rule, shouldn't exist in multiple categories, because that will sort of give conflict to your users on which areas of the site you should be searching. And one issue that I see come up a lot is that people create a menu with post categories, and then they have maybe 5 or 6 posts that don't really fit into the categories that they've already created. So they create a category called blog or general, and that just sort of, and so they can throw the rest of their miscellaneous sort of posts in there. I think if a post doesn't really suit any of the categories that you've already made for your site, you should probably question a little bit, is it suitable? Is that post suitable for your site? And if it is, then you need to focus on developing more content around that subject area and create its own sort of category for that. We don't really want to be seeing general or blog categories in the menu on your site, because it doesn't make it any easier for the user to find what they're looking for. And so just to talk about that in a little more detail, we strongly recommend having a menu at the top of your page. So the navigation of your site is front and center for your users. If you want to use drop-down menus with subcategories and nest your categories, that's absolutely fine. It's not required. We just recommend that if you are writing content that is categorized in some way, this could be on a pretty high level way, but it needs to be sort of rigid, and it needs to be consistent. It needs, as I said before, you need to be making sure that you're helping your users find the content they're looking for quicker. They're more often than not, they're not going to be coming to your site just for a browse. They're going to want to know something. So I think if you're struggling to think of how you should be organizing your site, just sort of keep in mind, what can I do to make it easier for my users to find the content? That's something that's really important, I think. And a major reason for sort of disapprovals is if when Google are reviewing the site, they don't really know where they're able to go to find content. So yeah, and then on top of that, we want to be making sure that there are no broken links. No, if you've updated your content recently, and switched your categories up, but then you've not updated the menu and you've got menu links that go to categories that don't exist anymore, that's going to mark yourself down with Google, and sort of make it harder to get Google domain approval. And you should have sort of, on top of that, you should have about pages. So your contact page, a little information about you or about the site and what its aims are, as well as things like privacy pages and legal pages, you should make them as easy to find as possible. Not only is this useful, but in many cases it's actually a requirement with personal data frameworks like GDPR. So that's something that's really important. I know we'll talk a little about it in the next slide, but things like privacy policies are a legal requirement now in many parts of the world. So it's definitely important to keep that in mind when you're sort of building out your site, and make sure you're crossing all your T's and dotting the I's, if that makes sense. So just to go back and talk a little bit more about menus. So a bad menu example here, we just drafted one up, is one that, okay, it has a link to the blog section of the website and has a link to take people back to the homepage, but there is no real way to allow your users to access the content any quicker there. And so and there's also no link to things like contact pages and legal information about the site either. So in the next example, okay, it's a little better. We've got a link to posts and a privacy policy. Okay, that's great. But we also, what is important to take away from these bad examples is that if, as a user, I'm going to your site, I'm not really going to know where the information is that I'm looking for. So again, just to reiterate, that's a great mindset to keep when you're developing things like your menu and the navigation for your site. How your users going to find this content? So a good menu example, this is globalmcdonaldsmenu.com. So this site is basically about different McDonald's menus around the world and different special menu items. So they've organized the site how you would maybe expect. They've split this up into continents, and then there's a drop down menu there, and that goes into different countries. So you can just go straight to the country that you're concerned about, and then you can find the content that you're looking for straight away. I'd say that I wouldn't overthink things too much when it comes to categorizing your content. Just the categories should sort of write themselves essentially, and as I say, just keep in mind, how am I getting my users to the content that they want to get to quicker? Know that they've also got an about page here, and that has a drop down as well that has links to contact and privacy policy and stuff like that. So they're keeping all of the legal requirements, legally required pages easily accessible as well. So this is sort of a perfect example of the sort of thing I'd look for when it comes to a website menu, as opposed to the examples that we've seen before. So we've pretty much covered everything that you would need to get domain approval, everything we'd need to get account approval. So just a couple of things on top of that. One thing that I see a lot of sites get disapproved for when sending them through to Ad Manager is that the site is down. You may not actually be aware of it, but it can happen sometimes. The site can go down. So make sure when you're submitting things to Google and sending them off for review that the site's up and running. Google can't approve a site that they can't access. And included in that is site maintenance pages. If you're working on the site and you put up a page to say that it's down for maintenance, make sure that's turned off as well. Ads.txt is something that's required to be set up in order to get Google Ad Manager approval. So we offer an automatic ads.txt setup in the Azoic setup process. So you should have this done as you're setting things up on the site. It's within the first few steps of the setup process, but just before you apply to Ad Manager, make sure that that's completed. And another thing that seems to get a lot of sites that had been disapproved for things like low value content approved is if people add a link to their privacy policy into the top menu. Again, this is just a legal requirement for things like GDPR, CCPA, and it just makes sure that your site is in keeping with all those things. So it covers your back and does tend to help when it comes to Google approval. So that's everything I had for everyone today. If you do have any additional questions, we'll stick around for the next minute or two, and you can go ahead and ask them in the comments, and I'll be happy to address them, or we can get Heather to help out in the comment section there as well. Okay, guys, if that's everything, we'll finish this up there. Thank you all for joining. It's been a pleasure talking to you today. Please keep an eye out in the Azoic community. We'll post in there about any upcoming webinars or events that we have that you can get involved with. And we're always monitoring the community as well to be able to help with any questions that you have. So please do feel free to get in touch with us there. But for now, I'll leave you all to enjoy your day. Have a good one, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks.